Now, if we continue considering what is at the basis of the therapeutic process, we've already stated that the welcoming of the experience and therefore the resulting feelings of the individual client is fundamental to the process. And what I'd like to reflect on now is a general idea about what I think feelings are all about, what the material being presented in the therapeutic process is really all about. And I think the most important point is to refer back to the idea that every feeling, every experience that needs to be corrected in therapy is the result of something that really happened along the way to whatever stage of life the client is presently in. In which case, in my opinion, the most important thing to understand is that whatever difficulty or feeling is being presented must be understood as the quest for something, the active seeking for something which was harmed or was not given or feels as though it's missing, and that feels some kind of gap or lacuna in the life of the individual that's involved. Now, that could start with something like a lack of recognition. I was never allowed to see how intelligent I am. I was never allowed to see how handsome or beautiful I am. I was not allowed to see how sexual and energetic I am. I was not allowed to see how imaginative and ambitious I am, or any of those kinds of fundamental wounds to the kinds of individual support that every individual requires. And you see, the most beautiful thing about that is that this presumes that every individual is a unique combination of those things. Now, the complexity of the caregiver's task is nothing less than that. He or she, father and mother, aunt, uncle, teachers, and so on, must be on the toes, on the balls of their feet, ready to balance with whatever beauty this individual child, this individual young person is bringing to the fore and wants to see recognized. I think I've mentioned already that when my own granddaughter was born, and my daughter invited us to come and see her, she's 4 hours old, and I took a good stare at her for a bit, and I then said to my daughter, be very careful. She's brilliant and has an hilarious sense of humor. That child is now 10 years old, and she's a hilariously intelligent cut-up. That's what she is. So that's been nurtured in her, you see. Now, what if that were shamed? Children are to be seen and not heard. You better be more polite. You can't joke like that. Well, there's damage being done. All right, that means that whatever feelings are welcomed, whatever aspects of the process are finally welcomed and invited in and allowed to express themselves as the first and fundamental foundation of the therapeutic process, invites the second aspect of it, which is to say, okay, that feeling that you experience, whatever it is, however joyous or dark, how sad or energetic, or whatever it is, what does it seek? What thing or things does it seek? In other words, the most important thing in my view to understand is that every feeling is some kind of expression of a want. All right, now, one of the generalizations that's made about the reaction to stressful or traumatic experience is that a child will develop either a flight response, in which case he'll tend to put down his wants, suppress them, go quietly, assume that he must surrender or she must surrender what it is that's wanted and not bring it up at all. And the other is to, of course, fight. In other words, to battle for it and to be aggressive and to fight with the person that's inflicting the wound or making the denial or whatever it is. Now, if you just look at those two reactions as fight or flight, they couldn't look as though they're more different in terms of what's going on. And if I look at one person and say, oh yes, he or she is passive and all that sort of thing, or he or she is belligerent and aggressive and angry and all that, they couldn't seem further apart. But if you look at it from the point of view of the unmet needs that that is expressing, then strangely enough, these apparently so different responses can be seen and understood as having a common root. If I'm repressing it, if I'm fleeing, if I'm essentially damping down my desires, I am assuming, of course, that I won't get it. It will not be given. There's no point in my raising the issue because I never get taken care of. I never get responded to. There's no hope in my getting it. How can that be similar? Oh, the angry person, the aggressive person, the one who's fighting is fighting because he or she assumes he's not going to get it. It won't be given. So that the common center of the experience produces these radically different responses to it. But notice that they essentially work from an understandable central experience. I am not going to get it. So I'm going to attack and fight and raise hell to see whether I can get it, or I'm never going to say or mention the thing ever again. Now, if we understand that those kinds of radically different responses to the situation are possible, it's a good indication of just how sensitive to the individual who is presenting the problem that we as therapists have to be to what is being presented. All right? But then it also allows for a kind of central understanding, a key to understanding why the feeling is in fact being experienced by this individual. Now that means, first of all, that we as therapists must understand that the client that's coming to us is appealing to us for that experience. I want it, and I want to see whether you can help me get it. If I as a therapist don't know that, then what the devil am I doing with this individual? I'm about to set up to disappoint him or her all over again. It's no wonder talk therapy is in jeopardy. But if talk therapy means I am ready to hear and understand what your feeling is, and I'm ready to understand that you want something, and that if you never got it from your original caregivers, you're doing the best you can to try and achieve that experience with me, then I understand what it is we're doing together here. Just recently I had an experience with a client who has been talking to a very lovely therapist. I'm friends, I know her, I respect her. But this client that suddenly appeared in my experience has been working for 14 years with this other therapist. And this individual feels that I am all over her because there are all kinds of things that I say about her wanting that she's never heard before. That I understand very well why she's so angry. I understand very well why she's so energetic. I understand very well what she's questing for. And naming the places where I thought the origin, where the beginnings of those kinds of wants really were. And she's wondering, well, we've talked 3 times and I'm saying that to her. And she's kind of hostile about the fact that I'm coming after her with such accuracy. Well, at the same time, she feels hurt and she feels no. She says, yeah, that is what I feel. You are saying it, you see. Now that's the important thing. What am I looking for? And the most important implication of what I'm saying here is that any relationship can be set up and understood as the quest for that. Now you see, what we're talking about here is not only the relationship with the therapist, but the fact that you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a husband or a wife, that becomes the vehicle from whom I am trying to extract the need, you see. Now the problem with that, and the thing that screws up so many relationships, including this of the client that I'm talking about, is the fact that when I quest for it so strongly, and when I go after it so passionately, I do not realize that I am starting with a fundamental, a profound conviction that I will not get it. And that's why I think that a realization is so fundamental. In other words, if I'm recessive, if I'm the quiet one, if I essentially take the route of flight, or if I'm the aggressive, the active one, take the energetic route of fight, you see, in both cases, I assume it's impossible. It's never going to happen. So the demand becomes kind of unmeetable. The action that I'm taking is not able to be satiated. It will never arrive because I don't believe it. And that means that at the center of an effective talk therapy and the recognition of feeling and the welcoming of all feeling is the growing experience of knowing that I can have this, that I can welcome it to myself. And the amazing thing about that is that it's almost about religious belief that that's not allowable. I invariably experience with my own clients something like, do you recognize how intelligent you are? Is it conceited to say that? Do you recognize how handsome or beautiful you are? Well, is it arrogant to say that kind of thing? Do you realize how much energy and ambition and hope for the future you have? Well, am I being greedy or selfish? In other words, those things are so tarnished by the negativity of my experience that I cannot allow myself. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't moments when that's false, someone who's arrogantly claiming to be this, that, or the other thing. And that lends credence to the fact that this is greedy, selfish, whatever it is. There is such a thing. But what's harder to come by is the positive part of it. What if you really are intelligent? Very intelligent. What if you really are very beautiful, very handsome? What if you really are wonderfully energetic? What if you're wonderfully sexual? What if that's the truth? How do I abide? How do I let that reside in myself? How do I let that be part of my experience with somebody else and not something I have to seek as an absence in me, you see? How do I say, well, yeah, I'm relating to you and we're having a wonderfully intelligent time together. Isn't this a great relationship? Isn't this a great business we're creating? Isn't this a wonderful conversation we're having? Isn't this fun that we're having or whatever? Because it's real. So you see, the allowance of that, the welcoming of that, the ability to welcome that is in a certain sense fundamental to having any one of these specific things. But it's, I don't want to say it's a separate experience, but it's a distinct experience. It's a distinct allowance, you see, to let myself have this. The way I characterize this, I always say that you can sense how much this has been negated in yourself. If you just ask yourself how you feel when you're at the table on your birthday and people sing happy birthday to you. I have never witnessed, like in a restaurant where someone's celebrating a birthday and suddenly everyone gathers around and the waiters come and present you with a candle. I have never experienced one of those parties where the object of all the energy and the person who's being positively focused on as the celebrant of his or her birthday doesn't kind of squirm uncomfortably with the fact that all that's being recognized in him or her. Don't do that. You see, well, that negative feeling when it is your birthday and it is being celebrated and everyone is looking at you, you see, and then you react that way, is a measure of just how much has been denied, how much has been negated, how much of what I want is not allowed. So I better be careful. I better be uncomfortable. I better be warding that off because, after all, I don't want to be conceited, arrogant, selfish, self-important, or any of those other words that we carry that are expressions of the degree of the negative part of our experience. How much I need to deny myself of this reality in order to correspond, in order to be faithful to the lessons about it that I have been taught. That, to my mind, summarizes, you see, the way in which negative experience in our training years sets you and me, sets us up individually to be our own worst enemies, to oppose the active fulfillment of the goals with which we are already endowed, but now no longer allowed to spend, no longer allowed to enjoy. And that is a way of summarizing the issue that I think is at the basis of therapy. How do I experience, how do I live the fullness of my life? You say. And that's why I call effective talk therapy learning life, learning to live the life which I am fully entitled, which you are fully entitled to live, but haven't been given the warrant of approval, the permission to do so. All right? And it's about gaining that I think effective therapy really works, really is all about.